Say a few words about the gala that we had on Friday night at the Sheraton Station Square. It was a wonderful event. We had over 300 people there. And as you know, every year we recognize our Veteran Voices of the Year. And this year we decided to recognize all the World War II veterans we could get into the room. And I was hoping for 25. I thought 30 would be great. We ended up having 55 gathered at the Sheraton Station Square. Patrick, I just was wondering if you enjoyed kind of being with your fellow veterans and being recognized, the World War II veterans.
That is true. I'm glad that I was there and recognized. And this hat I got on, this little doohickey up here says I'm a veteran of World War II. Down here it says I'm honorably. I was called back in 1950, and I went on this aircraft carrier where we were training pilots. And there's something I was thinking about this morning when I picked up this hat. I was on this carrier in fire crash and rescue, and I was right by the fantail. And we had a warrant officer. My job, I had an applicator pipe. Was 8 feet long. I was to get to the pilot. Forget everything else, get to the pilot. And we had a warrant officer that was training us. And he had been on a carrier during World War II that had been camouflaged and sunk. And he said to me, "You just get to the pilot. That's all you think about." He says, "If you drown him, it's okay." He says, "But if he gets one burn, I'm going to take you back to the fantail and kick your butt off the carrier."
That little doohickey on your hat is what was called the Ruptured Duck, right? You would get that after you were discharged after World War II, and you would pin it on your lapel, and it would show that you had served and you're being discharged. Thank you.
Also, on our uniforms, they put it up here, that we were allowed to wear that uniform for 1 month.
1 month.
Yeah.
1 month after being separated, you could wear the uniform, and you had the Ruptured Duck pin, that discharge pin on your lapel. Thank you very much, Patrick. Okay, I said that we're going to focus on the Navy today, and we have Bob Young here, who served in World War II in the Navy. He's spoken before about his service on the USS Kingsbury, which was an attack transport ship, a ship specifically designed to transport combatants and get them on the beaches with landing craft that was on that ship. And once again, I guess I'm thinking like big, beautiful ships. These are kind of, these are workhorses like the LST. This was another ship you were on, the USS Logan. And Bob, when you showed me these pictures, you gave me this little notation on the envelope or maybe on the back of the picture. It says 6,664 kilometers between Okinawa and New Caledonia.
No, yes, that's true. And I think a kilometer is 1.6 miles, so that's over 9,000 miles. We had to go to get our ship fixed. The front end of it's missing, you see.
Yes.
We ran into another ship.
You ran into another ship, and if you look up at the screen, you could see that the bow of the ship has like a bite taken out or a notch in it, and that's where you ran into another ship, and you had to sail all those thousands of miles to get it fixed?
That's true.
Wow. What was your job aboard that ship?
I was a radio man. I worked in the radio shop.
Bob Zelnick just talked about his father serving on an LST and participating in the invasion of Iwo Jima, as you did, and you said that there was such a need, there was such loss on Iwo Jima of radio men. They were taking Navy radio men off the ship and putting them in combat on the ground.
Half of our radio men had to go onto the ground, and we picked straws to see who would go. And I was lucky enough to pick a long straw and stay on the ship.
Wow, way. Were you able to see any of the action from the ship?
I was. We were anchored about maybe a mile off of Mount Suribachi, and we could watch all the action, and I actually saw them, the flag up there, when they put the flag up, and they said, they better get the hell out of there, they're still fighting in the air. Airplanes were fighting.
Wow. You also, some of the pictures you gave me are of the ceremonies that Bob talked about. You know, the Navy, the Navy is, I think it's safe to say, definitely the most tradition-bound branch of service. There are more traditions in the Navy that are kind of held sacred than in the other branches of service. And, you know, you guys have different ranks. You have different words for things, simple things like the floor. You can't call a floor. You call it a
Deck.
It's a deck. Walls are stanchions. Your bulkheads. I'm sorry. A stanchion is a post, a pillar. Your hat is a cover. And another thing that you guys do is you have all these kind of ceremonies, and one of them and kind of special statuses. And one of them is being a plank owner. And you are a plank owner?
Yes.
Can you describe what a plank owner is?
Well, as this young fellow just told me, it's if you, on the ship when it's first commissioned. And I helped them load the ship with the supplies before we started off.
So you were a plank owner of the Logan or the Kingsbury? Of the Kingsbury. And so you were there, part of the first crew of the Kingsbury.
That's true.
Okay. And George Freas, you are also a plank owner. And there's George up there. You served on LST 941.
Right, that's right.
And you were a plank owner. You had never had your plank owner certificate, but then Congressman Lamb presented it to you last year.
That's right. 75 years late.
75 years later. And I'm going to go, could you grab the mic and I'll go grab the plank owner certificate so you can see what it looks like.
Yeah, our ship was commissioned in Hingham, Massachusetts, and went down the East Coast, through the canal, and over into the Pacific. It participated. An LST really, truly was a workhorse. We carried all kinds of things to various islands over the Pacific. I can't name all the islands we visited with delivering things. Troops, gunneries, tanks, trucks, you name it, we delivered it. We participated in 3 amphibious landings, 2 in the Philippines, 1 in Palawan Island, 1 on Cebu Island, and 1 at Borneo. At Borneo, another officer and I were commissioned to take our LCVPs, our Higgins boats, and make smoke. They put us in the water and immediately stopped us. They said, instead of that, go to the flagship. And we did. His boat was called in first, and then all these photographers came down a ladder that was on the side of the ship. Then they called my boat in, and all these high-ranking officers came down and got into my boat, the last of whom was General Douglas MacArthur.
You heard Douglas
Your friend there who... I saluted. I had no idea he was going to be coming onto my boat because they hadn't told us where we were going to go or what we were going to do. Anyway, I saluted him and I said, "What are your orders, sir?" And he said, "Take us to the beach." And we ran up right out the beach. Shortly after, the rest of the... By the way, there were Australian troops on that Borneo invasion. We had staged in Morotai, had Australian troops. They went in first. Then we followed them in. And he said, lay off there for a while, I'll be back. He and all the rest of the officers that were with him got out. They were gone for about an hour and a half on a little recon visit, and then came back, and I took him back to his ship. But I was on the LST 941 until it was decommissioned. From the day it was commissioned till the day it was decommissioned. I served in 3 capacities there. Started out as stores officer, which was supplies. I had a period of time as an engineering officer on there, and I finished up as executive officer. And we left, I decommissioned the ship down in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and that's where we left it. I had not heard of the plankowner thing until one of the new arrivals over where I live at Concordia of the South Hills came in. He was a career Navy man. And we got to talking, and he said, well, gee, you're entitled to a plank owner's certificate. And I didn't know where it was or how to get one. He put me in touch with Congressman Lamb, who sent away for it. They had never heard of it down at Congressman Lamb's office. And they were so delighted when it came in because it was a big framed certificate, as you can see. Beautiful thing. Now, back in the old days of the Navy, the tradition was if you were a member of the crew, on the day the ship was commissioned, you were given a piece of the plank with your name on it. Now, that was the days of wooden ships. Today, this is what you get instead. And there was an oversight somewhere because we didn't know anything about that when mine was commissioned. So I sent away, and I got this one 75 years later after leaving that ship. There were 8 officers aboard the LST 941, including me, and I'm the last one that's still living. They're all gone, as are many of my crew members. I crossed the Pacific, and when you cross the Pacific, you go from being not a scallywag, but a pollywog. Then you become a shellback when you actually cross. When you are crossing the equator and they put you through this hazing thing, they bring a charge to the captain of the ship, Neptunus Rex, and then he deals out the punishment you're supposed to get. The charge against me was, am I allowed to tell this?
Yeah.
Spending a hard 8 hours in a house of prostitution in Panama. Now, I wrote that up in my scrapbook, and I said, this is for my children and grandchildren, and it was shore patrol duty, and it wasn't fun. I can guarantee you that. We were threatened every hour on the hour by the Panamanian men that were there. When we arrived on the scene, the chief that dropped us off there, he said, I want to take you upstairs first. It was Las Palmas Hotel. It was a big hotel with an open center and all these rooms around the perimeter where the girls were located. He took us to this one. He said, now, make sure she gets out of here. She was packing a suitcase. He said, she stabbed a guy last night. And I said, well, what do we have to do? He said, you break up the fights that started here. And believe me, they did. Every hour on the hour, there would be an outcry, he didn't pay. Oh, yes, I did. I did pay. I paid. We kick him out. And at one point, I was surrounded by these Panamanian men, and one said, are you the officer of the day? I said, yeah. He said, this is nighttime. Get the hell out of here. And I said, we're on duty. You get out of here. I was carrying a 45 at the time. But I enjoyed being with a bunch of really fine men, and I had correspondence with them up until last year when the last one died. But LSTs, I was proud to serve upon them, and I'm still proud today. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, George. And Bob, you went through all this stuff, the shellback ceremony, the line crossing ceremony in the Navy. Geez, how many lines are there in the world? There's the equator, there's the international date line, there's the 180th meridian, and maybe that's the same as the date line. Is that all? Is that the only?
As far as I know.
And you have these, you were an ancient order of the deep, and I don't know what that was for, and also imperial domain of the golden dragon. Do you know what that was for?
You get those things when you cross the equator. That's all there is to it.
When you cross the equator. And here's, Bob has pictures of the ceremony on his ship for the line crossing, and there starts with a flag, and then you have this.
That was the Jolly Roger.
Jolly Roger. And then you have King Neptune.
Let me apologize for standing. I couldn't get up too good. When my rear end's below my knees, it's tough to get up. So I had to stand.
We like it when you stand. It's great. You have, looks like King Neptune, and then a man next to the King Neptune dressed as a baby.
Yeah, we had a baby there, and all of those guys were dressed up like pirates. See the beards and the skull caps. Okay, so here's the royal desk, and all the pollywogs had a line up on the port side of the ship, and the shellbacks had a little group of guys that went around the ship and made sure that they were all there. Some of them were in sick bay trying to get out of it. Some of them, we had bunks 3 high, and they would get up on those third bunks, and they'd drag them out of there. And they had a lot of time to make paddles, and they paddled them all the way back to the line.
So this is an initiation ceremony for the pollywogs who have never crossed the equator, and the shellbacks were dealing out the hazing, the punishment, or whatever.
That's true.
Okay.
There we are. They made those paddles. They had a lot of time to make them. And if you didn't do things right away, you got smacked pretty good.
Now, were you, at some point, you were a pollywog. You went through this, right?
Your life I did, yeah.
And then you became a shellback, and then you dished out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I never was able to use the shellback thing. After the initiation, we were all shellbacks.
Okay, got it. You didn't get any new people. And there is a kind of head shaving?
That's the royal book. You had to kiss the royal book, and then when you bend down to kiss it, they shove your head in it and move your face around in it a little bit.
Very
This guy here, they give you haircuts, not a haircut, right through the middle, and that was it. And then from there, you drop you into a big tub of salt water, so you get all wet. This is the cook we had, and he would put all kind of lard or whatever on his stomach. You had to kneel down between his legs and kiss the belly, and you do that fast, and he'd grab you by the ears or the back of the neck, and he'd rub your face around his belly.
Bob, do you realize that every Army veteran here is giving you weird looks?
Here's some more. See the paddles they have? You had to act fast or you got smacked pretty good.
Oh, yeah, look at that paddle in the left foreground there. Yeah, I do see it.
And there's a operating table there, a little table they had. You had to get up and lay on it, and they had a wooden knife.
There it is.
They were going to operate on you, but the knife is charged. It's got electric charge in it, and when they hit you with that, you jump up and down.
That's sadistic, Bob.
It is. It is.
You had a cattle prod, George. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. and I can't tell what that is.
Something's going on there, and then,
Now, at the end of the line, you're all wet from being out of that saltwater tub, and you run down between all of the rest of the older fellas with the paddles, and you're all the way to the ship, all the way to the other end, and it was all over.
wow, well, I think I learned a little bit more, but I'm not sure I totally understand it any better. Thank you very much, Bob. I know we have at least one other plank owner, George Skivington. You're a plank owner of the USS John F. Kennedy.
Yes. Just to follow up on what he said, you saw he had the cards, right?
Yeah.
The reason you have the cards is you never, ever want to go through it again. The Navy puts it in your service record, and that's when they go over the equator, that's how they know who's done it and who hasn't done it.
You show your card and you don't have to be initiated.
Absolutely. I was on the carrier from 68 to 72, and our skipper thought, gee, to remind all these sailors of that they are a plank owner, first crew, we're going to give them a teak plaque. So I was in engineering. I can't remember how many thousand square feet of teak I had to go find so they can make, each of us has a plaque, an engraved plaque that was made of teak from the Kennedy. So
And you're a carrier, so that's a lot.
5,000 plaques.
Oh my gosh,
So the carpenter shop stayed busy for a while.
oh my gosh. Our tax dollars are hard at work.
I guess so, yeah. That's the least of it. Yeah.
And you said there's a new John F. Kennedy being commissioned.
Yes, the Kennedy went out in 2002, the original, and in December 7th, the new Kennedy, the CVN, the nuclear 79, is going to be commissioned. I don't know who the ship's sponsor, who's going to break the bottle, but I think it may be Caroline Kennedy. She's the one that did the original, and I think she'll be back again to do it. So we're going, we have an association, so there's probably about 100 of us are going to attend in Newport News. So looking forward to that.
Wonderful. Thank you, George Skivington. Any other Navy vet remember their line crossing ceremony, or as a plank owner? You want to try and explain this to our... Oh, yes. Hey, Dan Birchok. You're a shellback.
Yeah.
You went through this.
Yes.
On what ship and when?
I went through it on the Josephus Daniels, and I'm sorry I had to go out for obvious reasons, but so I didn't catch all his story. One of the things we had to do was, I'm sure he said this, from the back of the ship, we had to get on the hands and knees on the tread and go through what we got whopped. And he mentioned about the belly, and we had to take out a pit from his belly button with our teeth. And then one thing we did that sounds sickening, but they say it's hot down in the equator, and they saved garbage from the mess hall for weeks. Ugh. Yeah, you smelled it all over the place. Well, what they did for the initiation, they put that like in a big tub, and they dumped, I don't know, I guess it was fresh oil or used oil, it was black, and they filled up with that. And before you were finished, you had to go get a bath in there. And of course, they pushed your head down in it. And then you were done. And you came up here like you were baptized.
And then you were baptized and you were a shellback. And wow, I tell you, that would give me second thoughts about joining the Navy.
Oh, it was an experience.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah, I liked everything about the Navy, even the customs. He didn't mention this, but the old uniforms. And I didn't like it when they changed to the new uniforms recently, because I particularly like the old ones because of the tradition. The buttons on the front, 13 buttons, one for each original state. Yeah.
There's a joke about those buttons, and I'm not going to make it, but yeah, the 13 buttons on, I don't know.
Oh,
I
okay.
can't remember.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. I always asked when I first started getting involved, what if you got put on a ship and you got seasick? Yeah, too bad. That's the answer, too bad. I mean, we've had World War II veterans say, they spent the whole war sick. Pete Longstreth, who comes to our events and at Robert Morris and in the West, he said he was sick pretty much every day. Yes, Connie.
I just wonder, is this still going on?
Oh, do you know who we should ask? Some of these people over here look like they're on duty, active duty. This is Brandon Smith. Commander, would you mind standing up? You've got a lot to answer for here, Commander. You are, first of all, you're Brandon Smith. Your wife is Tierney Smith, who was here at our last event. She works for Senator Pam Iovino. And could you, first of all, tell people who might not be familiar with Navy rank, kind of the Army equivalent of a Navy commander?
Sure. It's a general. No, it's a lieutenant colonel for the Air Force or the Army or the Marine Corps.
So you're the equivalent of a lieutenant colonel. You look awfully young to be a commander already.
Thank you.
Okay. What made you decide to join the Navy?
I joined the Navy because I was in Oklahoma and I wanted to leave Oklahoma, and the Navy sounded like the thing that would get me the furthest away.
That's a good answer. You don't picture the Navy in Oklahoma, right?
No, and now I want to go back.
So you kind of wanted to join the Navy and see the world. Did you? Where have you gone?
I have. I've done a couple of deployments. The USS Nashville, the USS Iwo Jima, and the USS Nimitz. Most of my time was East Coast, and we would go through the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. And I've also done one tour out of San Diego where we went to the Pacific.
What was your job in those missions, those trips?
I am a Navy helicopter pilot. So I've never worked the can opener, but that's basically what a helicopter is a big can opener. So you could say I've worked a big can opener.
What in the world? We have at least one other helicopter pilot here. What in the world would make you want to fly a helicopter?
The challenge. I've deployed on 3 ships, but I've landed on dozens and dozens of them, and it's never the same. So daytime, nighttime, the work flying a helicopter as opposed to flying a jet is a multi-crew. You fly with another officer, and you also fly with one to two enlisted aircrewmen in the back, and you all have to work together to get on the ship if one person can't do it by themselves.
What kind of missions are these flights? Why are you flying? Where are you going? What are you doing?
Sure, we do search and rescue primarily. So every time that there's a plane or a helicopter flying, you also have to have a search and rescue asset available in case the worst happens. Sometimes landing on a ship, well, it's always complicated, but if you have an aircraft problem, sometimes it can be simpler to actually ditch the aircraft instead of trying to get it back on the ship. That's an actual safer option. So primarily search and rescue, but we also do logistics. We carry mail, we carry food, we carry ammunition between ships, we carry people, and then we do, being a helicopter pilot is kind of a jack of all trades. We do a lot of things.
You probably have so many missions under your belt, you don't even keep count?
I do not keep count. We usually keep count by flight hours, and I've flown about 2,000 hours.
We had another young helicopter pilot who served in Afghanistan talk about the impact of flying on your body. I mean, you get thrown around, you get jostled around. Is it physically a demanding job?
It is. The difference in a smaller helicopter, too, is that you can't get up and move around like you can in a plane, some planes. So it's usually 3 to 4 hours at a time. One of the common physical ailments that affects a lot of helicopter pilots is what they call the helo hunch, because you tend to fly hunched over with the controls in your hand, and you sort of just develop lower back. And the other thing about helicopters that a lot of people don't know unless you've been in them is they shake a lot. For people who are used to flying in aircraft, especially commercial aircraft, are used to relatively smooth flying unless you're in turbulence. Helicopters are always shaking. They're referred to as a bunch of parts flying in loose formation. It's one helicopter.
Commander Smith, who have you brought with you today?
So first off, we are here, it's a dirty word, maybe a dirty word, but we're here because we are Navy recruiters. Although I would guess that a lot of people here, if I asked you if you would join right now, you'd probably raise your. And I thank you for that. But we are here as part of Navy Recruiting Pittsburgh. We don't just recruit in Pittsburgh. We actually represent approximately 200 officers, sailors, and civilians across Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, and West Virginia. With me today is our commanding officer, Commander Tom McKeon, who grew up in Tennessee and Texas, and our Command Master Chief, Misty Marcucci, who grew up in Kansas. So again, for Army and Air Force equivalents, this would be roughly a Command Sergeant Major, if I understand correctly. But we are here. It's our first time here. We want to be back. We're here primarily because we want to be good community partners, and we want to be visible to you. Not everyone is used to seeing active duty of any service in the area, but especially the Navy in an area like Pittsburgh. We also want to encourage our sailors to come to these events because we want them to see you, because a lot of the reason they joined is to be like people like you because they heard your stories and they were inspired by them. But the other reason, quite frankly, is because we're here because we need help. Navy recruiting is a challenge. It's especially a challenge when we're growing the Navy as fast as we are. The Navy is going to be bigger in a couple of years, and it's been big than it has been in a couple of generations. And also, as you all know, the economy right now is doing great, which is a wonderful thing for our country, but is really hard for Navy recruiting. It's really hard to recruit at a 2% unemployment level. So we would ask, please share your stories, not just with each other, but there are young men and women of the Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania and New York area who also want to be like you and are inspired by your stories. And the more they are inspired, the more likely they are to serve. I joined not only because I wanted to get out of Oklahoma, that's only a joke, but my great-grandfather was a dentist in World War II. My grandfather was a radioman in the Korean War. And my uncle was a Marine in the Korean War. So a lot of the young men and women that we recruit have stories like this, and they say, I want to be like my grandfather. I want to be like my father, my uncle, or my aunt, or my grandmother. So please continue to share your stories because we see the impact of that in Navy recruiting. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for coming today.